there. Welcome to Culture by Culture, a multidimensional exploration of Black and Asian pop cultural ties. I'm your super jazzed host, Delia. And today I'm joined by creators, musicians, event producers, all around just Renaissance men, honestly. It's why y'all are always doing stuff. Gerald Watson and DJ Two-Tone Jones of Shaolin Jazz.
Hey, what's good?
Hey, y'all. Can y'all please introduce yourselves and tell us a bit, because again, I think y'all do a lot, but a bit about what y'all do over there at Shaolin Jazz.
Yeah.
So my name is Gerald Watson, one of the co-founders of Shaolin Jazz. What we do is we create events and produce content that highlight the intersections between hip hop, jazz, and martial art. We've been doing this since about 2011. We started as a mixtape where we fused Wu-Tang acapellas with the instrumentals and breaks from various jazz greats. And from there, we've just been going strong with, different kinds of events, live performance, music performance, movie screening events, college lectures, art shows, just a range of events and content.
Yeah, and I'm DJ Two-Tone Jones, the other half of Shaolin Jazz. And beyond that, just DJ from around here and been working with Gerald for much longer than before 2011. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Yeah, for the listeners, they're DC locals. Y'all know I'm from DC. And it's so cool finding people who do cool stuff like that are local to you. Because, I interview people from all over, but having local people doing such cool stuff, that always gets me super jazzed. The intersection of hip hop and jazz and martial arts, I think, is something that is very clear if you're on this side and it's something you're interested in. But I wonder what drew y'all to that and how y'all became interested in that specific intersection.
As Gerald mentioned, we kind of got things started around 2011. And yes, again, as you mentioned, it was all really a mixtape concept. So it kind of really started from there. And at its core is just this concept of celebrating two things that we are both fans of. They're kind of, random in some sense, but jazz as a genre of music, and then Wu-Tang Clan, and doing like a mixtape kind of blend project where we kind of fused the jazz breaks and instrumentals with lyrics from the Wu-Tang Clan. So that's the start of it. And really, I guess more importantly, even where we got our name from, it was really based on the mixtape, naming something that is influenced by Wu-Tang and by jazz. So Shaolin Jazz was the name we came up with. And for those of y'all that are Wu-Tang heads, there's the big martial arts connection with Wu-Tang and a lot of influence behind them as a group and their members' names and things like that. So that's where really kind of like the hip hop jazz piece comes in, but then also just because of Wu-Tang, that martial arts component as well. And, I would say over the years of just some of the programming and events and content we've developed, it's been more than just Wu-Tang, in terms of our reference to like martial arts within hip hops, but kind of exploring, how hip hop has been connected with hip hop culture and hip hop community over the years through movies and references and music and things like that. So, for us, it's just kind of, again, finding creative ways of continuing to explore how these three connect. Sometimes it's just 2 out of 3 or what have you. But yeah, we just kind of have fun with how we can blend these kind of concepts together.
So was it Wu-Tang Clan that came first, or did the interest in martial arts come first, or were they kind of like both things for both of you? Like, what's the origin story there?
I'll speak for myself, and I think it's probably close to the same for Gerald. But I mean, martial arts was definitely a thing even before Wu-Tang Clan. I think, to be honest, Wu-Tang was influenced by martial arts,
for sure,
in their lives around the same time we were too. Hip hop in New York still kind of coming of age in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. You also have the introduction of kung fu flicks in that whole world, in those theaters and grindhouse theaters and things like that, where they're showing these films. Most of the patrons were, young Black and brown folks that were enamored by what they were seeing on screen and just really just crossed over. And Wu-Tang came around and just that was undeniable as well. So it just made it even cooler, really. Wu-Tang made martial arts and hip hop much cooler than what it already was.
For me, it was a similar story, to be honest. There was, on TV, we're watching what was called Kung Fu cinema or Kung Fu theater, depending upon what part of the U.S. you were in. You were watching either one or both. And on those days, usually weekends, they would show a range of like Shaw Brothers films, martial arts films from the Shaw Brothers catalog. And so, you're seeing Five Deadly Venoms and Method Man and just like a variety of those martial arts films. Like Two-Tone mentioned Wu-Tang, a lot of those guys, they get their names from these films, Old Dirty Bastard, Ghostface Killer. So watching those films first, and then, that was the introduction to that. And then hip hop comes along, and there's, always been the synergy, even before Wu-Tang, that existed, I think, between both hip hop and martial arts for a variety of reasons. There's actually books that have recently come out. There are those intersections that exist and those synergies that have existed between the two. And so for me, that's where that comes from, or the start of it. And Wu-Tang comes along and it's like, okay, this all makes sense. And these are the reasons why. They were able to articulate it through their music, even perhaps visually in such a way that allowed us to understand what we were thinking, but we weren't thinking about how and what way to do it. I don't know if you've seen the dramatic series Wu-Tang on, I think it was Hulu.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they really explain in detail how and where martial arts played a part in their development. So it's actually a really, really dope series. If any of you haven't seen, I say, check it out. For those of you who are watching, listening, definitely check that series out. So yeah, that's where it comes from for me.
Very cool. Everyone's gonna have to borrow Hulu. Netflix doesn't let you share passwords, but Hulu still does. So.
Right, Hulu's still right. Hulu's got you.
Hulu's got you. So I'll definitely have to check that out for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's super interesting y'all are talking about the connection and how it was for y'all coming up. Like, I missed the boat on coming up when, martial arts films, especially like the Kung Fu films, Shaw Brothers for sure, were in the zeitgeist, were like super popular. But the first interview I did on this podcast was with my dad, because he is an old head. Like, he grew up in the segregated South in Texas. And like, that was kind of his introduction into specifically Asian pop culture, was going to see these like, what did he call them? These dime shows. Like, he would literally go and pay like 10 cents and see 2 movies in the day or something like that, and would just go see some Kung Fu films. And that was kind of his introduction. And part of why I wanted to do this podcast was because the way I see it and I've noticed is like, there seems to be like 2 or 3 waves of this interaction between the 2 races through pop culture. Like, you have the first wave, which I feel like is Kung Fu films. You have old heads like my dad all the way through the 80s, I would say. Is that right? And then shortly after that, you have anime. And I feel like people really get into that. And there's that generation who's probably my generation / maybe a little bit of the generation before me. And then these days, my little sister, we're like 10 years apart, is like K-dramas and K-pop and stuff like that. Right. And so I just think it's really interesting that we have these cultures that are drawn to each other over the course of the generation over and over again. Like, I'm not conflating the cultures, just to be clear to the listeners, but there's this push and pull, I think, that is constantly happening that I think is super duper interesting. And I hear my listeners, they have asked repetitively for a Wu-Tang episode. It'll come. But like, it really is like the crystallization, I think, of those things melding together and like being able to express like a specific Black American creativity and like message through the melding of these 2 mediums, I would say, hip hop and martial arts. That was a bit of a tangent.
No, it's all good. All good. Yeah.
My next question was going to be, what was the catalyst for the project of Shaolin Jazz? So you like both have these interests, and you said y'all knew each other for a while. So why in 2011 are y'all like, look, we're going to do this mixtape. It's time.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to keep the story short. But it starts out with me. I was doing a series of album cover art exhibitions called The Classics, where I would highlight different genres of music, different album covers from the different genres of music that I'm into. So from rap music, reggae, rock, funk, soul, jazz. And so about every month I would highlight a new genre with all these album covers. Maybe 80 or 90 or so album covers. And so I would reach out to different DJs to, see if I could highlight their specific album covers. And so, having the friendship with Two-Tone for so long, I normally come to him with ideas first. Like, hey, I got this idea. What do you think? And so he, was down for me to highlight his album covers for the rap music one, which was first. And so those went pretty good. And so jazz was the last one. And I purposely set jazz to be the last one because I grew up with a lot of jazz in my household. And so I wanted to do something a bit special for it. I wasn't sure what. And in doing these events, I would interview different album cover designers. And so in the last one, I interviewed a guy by the name of Logan Mills Walters, who created a series of album covers he designed called Wu Note that blended Wu-Tang album covers with classic Blue Note album covers. So it's really, really interesting and dope series. And in my research, I saw that he had done an album cover for like a Wu-Tang Beatles project. And that's when I had the light bulb moment about, wow, this would be kind of fresh. Now, For each of these events, I would have DJs come and spin that particular music.
Mm-hmm.
But then I would also have Two-Tone specifically create a mixtape for each event. And so jazz was the last one. Again, I had this light bulb moment about interviewing Logan. Like, I wonder if he's ever done a Wu-Tang Jazz project. And so his reply back was no, but I would if one ever existed. And, here we are today.
That's so cool. It's interesting to me that Wu-Tang in and of itself has inspired so much fusion. It makes sense because that is essentially what they brought to the hip hop game. Other people were too, but they brought something new at the time that they brought it.
Right.
I think a lot of kids, I'm not that old, but I feel it sometimes. A lot of like the new rappers and stuff, it's like common almost, like to be fusing your interest in anime and like martial arts and things like this into what you're doing. But like Wu-Tang did it first. And so I think it's really cool that your fusion was inspired by fusion that was inspired by Wu-Tang kind of, That's how some of the best art is made, in my opinion. I am curious though. Okay, so you have a mixtape, but the way I found y'all was through the Sound Patterns event back in April, I think.
Okay.
It was very cool. I think I posted about it on my podcast Instagram. I can't remember exactly, but it's very cool. Super cool art.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And it was a good time. I think it was you, Two-Tone, right? That was
spinning. Yeah.
Spinning. Yeah. But the vibes, immaculate. The art, so good. I found so many cool artists. All that's to say, I would not have known at that event that y'all just started as like one mixtape project. So how do you go from there to what y'all are doing now, which is, like y'all said at the top, like it's a lot. And I think all of it's very cool, but how do we get here?
Yeah. So I think that very much has to do a lot with the fact, again, that Gerald and I have been working together and known each other for some time. And Shaolin Jazz is like the project that happened to come into existence at like the right time. And just kind of like the stars had aligned in terms of just me and Gerald working together. And really, it grew out of more so routine of what we were doing. Like, we had years of experience working together, doing pop-ups at different spots and doing in-store events and things like that. It was a thing of just kind of like what we were just used to doing. We're like, all right, so we have this cool project and our minds, the best of our ability. How do we get this out to the world or kind of showcase this? So it was like, all right, let's do a listening party. And hey, we've done something like this before. So find a space, set up the turntables, we'll play the music, we'll maybe have some drinks or something. And that was something that we had experience kind of doing in multiple places. So it wasn't too hard for us to kind of figure out, okay, let's maybe find a space in New York and do a listening party, space in Philly, DC. And with that, again, we had experience doing art events. So having an art component also was just something that we're used to doing with most of the events that we did in person. So we reached out to our friend Ania Udofia, who's a muralist visual artist here in DC. His work is probably one of the more recognizable works in terms of murals around the city of DC. I think his biggest, most notable mural in the city is the Ben's Chili Bowl mural. He's the artist.
Oh, word. Okay.
So we had him come through, not only do a live painting or whatnot during the listening party, but he was down to also create a short kind of series of smaller pieces, all inspired by the mixtape project. So our first listening party in DC was also a pseudo art exhibition with some of his work. Actually, DC, New York, and Philly were all art exhibitions. Most of them were done in art galleries. So it organically went from mixtape and then, hey, we have some artwork that we're showcasing and we're doing listening parties. And then just when we thought it would just be that, someone reached out to us about coming to their class at Temple University to speak to them about our project and our concept with the mixtape. So that turned into our lecture series, which we started kind of putting out there and doing at other schools. And what else? Gerald came up with the idea of doing an album cover design competition. We put together some prizes from different brands that Gerald had connections with. And we weren't really expecting a whole lot out of that. But what went from maybe expectations of like 3 to 4 submissions ended up being a total of 37 submissions from graphic designers all around the world. Not a single designer was from the DMV area, where we had designers from New York to LA to Japan, Russia. And it just kept, again, snowballing. It was like, okay, well, now we got all these really cool designs. Hate to not do anything with them. That led us to doing like a line of apparel and with the permission of the artists themselves as well. And then, of course, the idea of doing maybe a live performance of the mixtape with the live band. And I've experienced playing with the band called Sound of the City. That led to Shaolin Jazz Live. You know, again, Gerald and I just have had this working relationship over the years. And when this concept came around, everything became kind of turnkey and organic. And it just has led us to where we are now. And now we're doing movie screening events. And again, it's just us finding creative ways of continuing to kind of expand on these kind of connections and intersections.
Yeah, it's mad cool to me how organic the journey has been.
Yeah.
And it feels, seeing like y'all stuff on socials and like y'all be doing Can I Kick It all summer. It just seems like it's just like a good time. Like the vibes are so good.
It's a vibe. What we do is a vibe.
It's a vibe.
That's the goal.
It's definitely a vibe. It surprises me. It like surprises me in a good way. Because I feel like it makes sense that Wu-Tang heads are into it. It makes sense people who grew up on, you know, the Shaw Brothers films love what y'all are doing. It makes sense to me that like just general nerds are into what y'all are doing. But if you go to these events, like there are all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds at y'all's events. And so I'm just wondering what the reception's been like from people who maybe you would think are like not usually in these spaces, and how that's felt getting that type of reception.
You know, I put it to like this. Our first listening party in DC was, you know, just kind of set the tone, if you will, for, you know, exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it's just wide range of ages, races, you know, levels of interest. There's some friends and fam in the crowd, of course, but then a lot of people who we did not know. And then people having all kinds of conversations around as I'm walking through the event and just kind of taking it in myself, just noticing that. Again, that was our first project. So it was very different for that time. And so it was just interesting looking at that wide range of people. And so that has happened at the events that we do pretty much across the board, even in different markets, you know, the variety of college lectures and let's just say even the schools that have brought us out, you know, South Dakota University and just all kinds of places that we've been through that we would never think, but it's pretty cool to see that. So what you experienced, you know, is exactly that. You know, we honestly wouldn't have it any other way. It's just great to see. Again, can't really plan for it. You just, you put some art out and hope people are into it.
For y'all, what is the importance that you see in highlighting and exploring specifically the intersection of hip hop, jazz, and martial arts?
I mean, honestly, you know, of course, for us, it all just really starts with just our own interest. But even with that, we are very intentional on how we present whatever, you know, we're interested in. And these things, you know, like when we first started creating the mixtape too, like, you know, a lot of it was very intentional in terms of which songs to select, which artists to kind of highlight and use, how everything layered with one another, you know, me as a DJ and just caring so much about the sound. Like I didn't want it just to sound cheap or I don't say cheap, but it sounded like it was just kind of thrown together. Like the goal was with this mixtape, highlight what's great about Wu-Tang and what a fan like myself really enjoys about Wu-Tang and the aesthetic that comes with it, along with the creativity and the brilliance and the uniqueness of jazz. And the range of jazz too. And, you know, and even beyond that, again, with just how we do events and all the way up to the movies that we do with Can I Kick It? We want to really like not be so overly educational about it, but these are opportunities for people to learn and discover more things. And for folks that are already into this, to like re-experience things in a different way. A friend of mine, I remember a friend of mine early on hearing the mixtape for the first time back when we first put it out. And one of the coolest things to hear was when he said, he was like, yo, this is like listening to Wu-Tang with different ears. Like we're both, you know, he's ahead, I'm ahead. He's like, for me and my wife, we just kind of sat down and played it all the way through and just kind of took it in. And it just was like an experience, reimagining how Wu-Tang could sound, but like it still felt like it all fit. So we're, you know, very intentional about that. And, you know, at the end of the day, again, we're playing around with or exploring different ways to touch on things that we're fans of. And so we want to, you know, show our reverence for what these things are and these different types of culture and forms of artistic expression. And we want to do it as best as we can. When we got around to doing the lecture, I think there was definitely some intent on making sure that us being in some of these academic spaces, you know, we're being invited to colleges and universities. There was intention in terms of the level of information and detail we provided to really kind of show the importance of even discussing this in these spaces. With high regard is how jazz is taught in school and things like that. And that's something we even, you know, touched on too in our lectures from time to time. Is like, think about it this way, like in academia, we consider jazz as America's classical music. Whereas when jazz first came out, it was the devil's music and no one
It
would touch it.
was,
And,
yeah.
hip hop is the new jazz. It is the
Mm.
biggest cultural musical phenomenon worldwide right now. It influences more things than any other genre directly. Just the same way jazz made its way up in these spaces and other forms of music, hip hop deserves to be that way too. But we can also discuss it in a similar fashion. So again, everything, we do is again with intention and detail in terms of just kind of showing the high qualities of these different things.
For a second, you had me forgetting I was hosting a podcast. I was just sitting here like, oh, he's spitting. That's crazy. Because everything that's so true is so true. The history of jazz, hip hop is absolutely our generation's jazz, like for sure, without a doubt. I'm so interested to see what will happen decades from now, how academia will finally be talking about hip hop and recognizing it for what it is. I also want to go back to what you were saying, the compliment that your friend gave your first mixtape. It's so interesting that you said that because when I was listening to y'all's mixtapes, what I came away with, I'm like, this is nostalgic in a way that is new. Like, it's new to me, but it felt nostalgic in a way that I couldn't really experience. Like, I couldn't pin it to like, oh, this reminds me of this time in my life or like this thing. Like, I went through things. I'm like, yeah, but like, I don't know. It's tapping into something that, is both old and new, which I think makes absolute sense when you consider the fusions that y'all are tackling through your mixtape. So I just thought that was really interesting. I was like, ooh, are they in my head? That's wild. One of my last questions for y'all was going to be like, what's been the most surprising thing on the Shaolin Jazz journey?
Being able to travel as much as we have domestically, and then, we've done some overseas stuff, to have gone to the places that we've gone to on a very high level, like esteemed level, in Ethiopia, domestically, and at the Kidney Center, selling out the Kidney Center. Honestly, like it's those kinds of things, that travel, just being able to get it out and share with people as much as we have, I think has been super big because the internet allows information to travel indefinitely. But, for us to be able to hop on as many planes, trains, and automobiles as we've done, literally. So like that's been, the surprise. Because again, this was like a conversation in Two Tone's basement in like 2010. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Gerald definitely listed some of the same things I was thinking of. It's definitely been at times where some of the folks that I've looked up to as a DJ and just as a fan of music, to have folks like that even kind of comment on or give us props on things that we've done or work with us in some degree has been really, really special. And I mean, seeing somebody like Pete Rock reposting some of the songs that we put out, or other DJ colleagues or friends or whatnot coming out and seeing what we do with Can I Kick It, and them kind of sitting back and being like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. This is a whole new lane, I'll say this just even, as a DJ, and just my feelings towards it is that it's really just changed my own personal kind of connection or space as a DJ. Like I've kind of have moved on to a space where like I'm not really fiending as much to like DJ traditional parties or sets like I've been doing for years and years, whereas for me doing Can I Kick It like fills that void. Like it's what I look forward to doing more than anything else with regards to DJing or what I do behind the turntable. There's a sense of pride knowing like, yeah, this is something that I don't know any other DJ that does this, that I've ever seen, know of, or anything. And like, this is something that unique that like we can claim, if nothing else. This is something uniquely different that like even my peers and what have you, they're not even doing this. This is just something completely different. Being able to carve out truly a new lane with something and have taken it this far too is just definitely has been a blessing.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I'm really glad that y'all get the respect. Again, I'm new to y'all. Like, I really don't, but it still makes me happy knowing that y'all been given the props that y'all deserve, because you could tell just stepping in, you're like, oh, they on something different for sure. So my second to last question would be, what are you're doing all the stuff with Shaolin Jazz. Y'all are seeing a lot of success, a lot of varied interest, again, from all sorts of people. What are your hopes for the future? When you look to the future, what does it look like for Shaolin Jazz?
For us, it's really being able to provide more opportunity for people to engage, specifically our Can I Kick It movie screening engagement at the push of a button. Now we did some experimenting with Twitch during COVID. And so that informed us about some ways in which we can provide more exposure to people of that particular engagement. it was interesting. People still email us, people in the area that come to one of our events, or even when we're out of town, people come up to us and like, yo, man, what y'all were doing on Twitch was really dope. So knowing about that and seeing how that affected people in that way, positively affected people, was cool. So that's one of the big things really as we look to the future, because that has been one of our more marquee engagements. And outside of that, it's just conducting more of our live screenings and live events, those kinds of things, doing more art shows. The one that you attended, we hadn't done one in a minute. And so it was cool because, of the reception that it received, because we hadn't done one in a while. So it was like, okay, great. So yeah, so that's what's up on the radar. Let's go.
For sure. I'm gonna try and make it out. That's the goal. I be a homebody. I've been trying to push myself to go out more this year. 2023 is the year of me going outside. So for my last question, for folks like me who missed the boat on the martial arts hype in our popular culture, what is one film or work, it doesn't necessarily have to be a whole film, that you think folks should see?
So to be honest, even though I did watch Kung Fu theater and stuff growing up, I never remembered any titles or names of characters. Okay. I do vividly remember like watching several of them. It was just kind of on and I just watched.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard, I hate to like do the super obvious, but the ultimate gold standard of Kung Fu flicks is Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. It's like the most influential, not to say that it was what influenced all the other Kung Fu flicks that, kind of really started the explosion, but it was a film, and Bruce Lee was a person who completely influenced that market thereafter. And there's countless, literally in the hundreds of films that imitated him or his persona or use imitation names just off of him. And again, Enter the Dragon was a film that it was more influential than The Matrix has been to like sci-fi action films to date. But outside of that, I think a really cool film to check out, I definitely enjoyed the times we've shown this, Master the Flying Guillotine is a really cool weapon, villain, I guess, if you will. And for any, video game heads, it is one of the films that also played a big role or influence on the video game Street Fighter.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Not to give too much away, but I know I was a fan of the character Dalsum, the Indian cat in Street Fighter 2. His character is basically taken from Master the Flying Guillotine and their horrible cultural appropriation of everyone from India in that film. But yeah.
Right.
But nah, cool, fun film. Yeah.
I would say a pole diagram fighter. It's one of those Shaw Brothers classics. But if you're really in the know, like it's definitely a gem. I'll say that. I mean, for sure, a gem for me. But, from the story to, the fighting, some movies run pretty fast, some are in the middle, some are they move slow. Like there's this build up to the big battle, as me and my homie used to talk about back in the day. But, that one, it moves really well. So there's something happening throughout the film. And yeah, it's one of those, to me, one of those joints, one of my favorite films that we do for Can I Kick It when we go into our martial arts bag. So yeah, for those who are familiar or unfamiliar, I should say, 8-pole diagram fighter. Yeah, check that out.
Okay. I'm added to the list. My watch list as I've gone through this podcast series has grown and grown, which I love. I love it. I'm going to make the time. We're going to do it. Y'all are going to get a whole review series eventually. I promise.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's...
maybe I don't promise, but it's going to happen. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me. Go ahead and tell the good folks where they can find you and what y'all got in the works, whatever you want to do. The floor is yours.
Okay, so yeah. So, everyone can find us at ShaolinJazz.com. And that's spelled, Shaolin is spelled SHAOLIN, jazz.com. And then all of our socials across the board, IG, Twitter, at Shaolin Jazz. And then outside of that, just Google Shaolin Jazz. If, you just want to just kind of, go through that rabbit hole, and check out, see what we're doing, music, events and everything else in between.
Awesome. I will also be sharing whatever y'all got going on. Y'all know I'm in the DC area, but I have lots of listeners who are also DC based. So y'all keep an eye out, follow them. But if you don't follow them, I will also be shouting out stuff they got going on. So keep your eyes peeled. But yeah, thank you all for listening. It's been great fun. I'm curious if y'all are listening. Are y'all Wu-Tang head? What's your favorite Wu-Tang track? If you're not, why not? Get into it. Let us know. You can do all that and let me know at Culture X Podcast on Twitter or Instagram. And until next time, keep it chill and keep it nerdy.